Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another edition of MHQ's Foundation 101 podcast, where yet again we are joined by Ismail Ajar, EY MENA Private Family Enterprise Head. Good morning, Ismail.
Very good morning to you, Jan, and very pleased to be back on your podcast for the second time.
Here we go. So we continue this thematic around single family offices. We touched on what the generalist topic a couple of weeks back. Then we look at some of the jurisdiction that one could consider if one wanted to set up a SFO here in the UAE. Today, what I want to do with you is for those people that actually are thinking about kicking off the process, giving them 5 do's, 5 don'ts, so that they have the entire roadmap to think of and then reach out to you or us both together if they want to implement their project. Ready? So let's go. So Ismail, I want your 5 do's. What should any family thinking of doing an SFO start with and think of?
Well, the most fundamental one, and it's aligned with what I said 2 weeks ago when we had the first podcast. You need to treat your family office like a business. It needs to be professional. There needs to be good governance, operational excellence, and really you need to professionalize every aspect of it, focusing on people, processes, and technology. You need to formalize procedure, and if you do that well, the FO could really act as a platform to centralize and institutionalize the overall wealth management activity and more, because most FO have much more services than just managing the wealth.
Understood. That's clear. So clearly treat it like a business. We talked last week about some of the jurisdiction. You mentioned that in your dues. How important is that?
I think it's fundamentally important because I've seen families failing just because they selected the wrong jurisdiction. And the world is moving towards, a direction where, regulation, transparency are much more important than before. So these 2 parameters can't be ignored anymore. So I'd mention a few criteria, not all of them, but you need to select a jurisdiction with the right FO ecosystem. That ecosystem has to be aligned with the services that you're going to need the FO to provide to your family. You're going to need, of course, very strong regulatory legal framework. You're going to need availability of talent and service provider within the jurisdiction. The jurisdiction needs to be close to the family. If it's not close, at least accessible. Yeah. That, it's not painful for the family to go there. It's part of their lifestyle to visit the jurisdiction. And of course, the ability to create substance in the jurisdiction, right? And substance is such an important word in today's world. And I'd like to mention one thing. Some families that I worked with actually did not select one jurisdiction, but they selected 2 jurisdictions. And that was made possible because they had actually too many services to be pooled in one jurisdiction. And because also of the diversity of such services, indeed some services were more wealth management in nature to be pooled in a financial center, and others were more, private, personal services to the families, which really had to be pooled and provided from a jurisdiction that is very, very close to the family's home.
Yeah, and I'll rebound on that. We see that a lot in our practice too, where increasingly people are, typically people in this region are having some sort of epicenter here, but not everything. And often say have some sort of lifestyle environment in London or Singapore or New York. And then would have whatever of their support organization split into 2 and using 2 key financial centers, 2 key hub, 2 super jurisdiction. I'm with you. I agree on that. Your third point is that you stressed the importance of segregating private investment from business. I think this rebounds a little bit with your first point, where you actually need to treat that with focus. Maybe a couple of words around this.
Absolutely. But to me, the segregation between private and business really go beyond, the professionalization aspects, because I mean, it's fundamental to the success of both the business, but of course also the family office, to keep things separated. And it's not only about investment; it's also about, people, talent matters, and family talent matters. And what we see, for instance, with families, is that the family office can really help families. It almost makes it easier to segregate private from business, because at least there is, through the family office, a second platform other than the business that is there, that can be used by the family, that family members who are not interested by the family business, can play with to a certain extent, can be associated with, and find, find their an occupation, find a title, or potentially find their remuneration if, they're not shareholder in the business and they're not employed or board member in the business. And these three aspects, the title, the occupation, and the remuneration, are, based on my experience, three fundamental, three fundamental points, or that family members needs to have to be happy at the end of the day, and not keep the rest of the family busy with potential issues.
I agree, and I think it segues into your next point, which is the accountability. Because when you segregate properly, when it is clear what the KPIs are in the business or in the SFO, it is much easier to discuss items in transparency and to hold people accountable for good or for bad. So what about transparency? How important is it in a single family office?
So transparency and honest communication is fundamentally important to build trust within any group of individual, or any business, be it a family business, a family office, or a multinational. In the family office, the transparency is there on the family side, but is also there on the, family office staff side. And it's about really creating a culture of transparency within the family office, to discourage potential staff, for instance, to, replicate old school, conflict of interest, let's say, approach that they may have, learned when they were working in a private bank or in an investment bank, right? To really have the best interest of the family in mind. And, conversely, when we look at the family, transparency will bring, at the end of the day, less potential or less room for conflict, and should bring, if it's done properly, and if, the setup of the DFO is actually sound and well done, it should also bring buy-in from the rest of the family.
Yes. Yeah, I'm with you. And it's also this question of alignment of interest. So you cannot have alignment of interest if you do not properly monitor and have full transparency on what people are doing and what is the rationale for doing something within a framework. You mentioned here your last point, the aim for diversification. This is interesting because every SFO is actually built often on a cash event, which very often comes from a family business, and you actually want to diversify in the first place. So maybe a couple of words around this.
Absolutely. But one thing that I've noticed at quite many occasions with wealth owners is that they don't look at diversification in a holistic manner, meaning that they might think, oh, let's say DFO has 3 bank accounts. They might look at each bank account individually and think, oh, that bank account is well diversified that way. But they do not look at the bigger picture. And these bank accounts may be invested at the end of the day in exactly the same stocks or the same industries. So that, as such, do not create diversification, or not, let's say, optimal diversification. Another thing that I've observed is that most often wealth owners, when let's say assessing whether they're diversified or not, or the optimal diversification, they often do not even look at the business, and they may end up, accidentally have an investment strategy that basically is too closely connected to the business, meaning that if there's a downturn, in that particular industry or these particular sectors, that might affect both sides of the wealth, which is the worst thing that you want to happen. You wish to have, a family business and a private wealth whose growth is, let's say, not entirely correlated, and that can be achieved through diversification. And to connect with my point around, transparency and promote transparency and separate business from private, diversification can also be found, in talent.
Yes.
At the end of the day, and talent within the family office and talent within the family itself. Arguably, 95% of family members have, certain skills and capabilities, right? And again, if they can't or they don't want to work in the business or to contribute to the business, right? Give them the chance to achieve their potential within another family platform that can be the family office.
Yeah, or a philanthropic venture that is associated with it, something that we'll discuss in a couple of weeks on how single family office foundation and philanthropy can tie up together very nicely as part of a family diversification strategy, because it is education and it is important for families as well. We talked about the do's. Let's talk about the don'ts. So 5 points that every single family office would-be founder should know before they kickstart this journey.
Absolutely. And to be honest, when I initially put together the list, I had, much more than 5, but I had to reduce to 5. And I'm trying to break some myth. The first myth, your family office should not do everything by itself, meaning you do not need to have, 30 accountants, 10 lawyers, and, 20 bankers for your family office to be, to be the greatest family office, let's say in your region or in your market. You can keep the structure lean, but as we mentioned last time, you need to consider outsourcing, and you need to consider outsourcing in a smart manner.
Yes.
And let me tell you that the most successful family offices in the world, they keep a lean people structure, lean organizational structure, but they outsource a lot. But again, they outsource in a smart manner where they keep an eye on what's going on, and there's a clear procedure that relates to outsourcing within the family office.
Very clear. We talked about this before, about this this ability and necessity to diversify and monitor. And I think all this comes from strategy. And I recall 2 weeks ago, that was one of your first points. It's like you need to define your strategy first. You cannot just jump into it with a lot of enthusiasm and a big heart. You need to put down what matters to you and then a roadmap to implement it. And that's what you articulate here as one of the don'ts. Don't proceed without a strategy.
Absolutely. I mean, like anything in life, if a family office is a business, right? I mean, you wouldn't want to start your business with at least, the starting point of a business plan. I know that, these days some startups start without a business plan, which is fair enough, good for them, right? But at least you want to have, the starting point, the vision of the family. What is this family office going to do exactly? How is it going to be funded? Is it going to be a cost center or not, or profit center? What does the family actually need from the services, and eventually, and who will be, of course, the beneficiaries of the family office? And eventually it ties in with what we said 2 weeks ago, the conversation that we had. I think the ideal starting point for every family is to have a menu of services, as we said, like the menu of the restaurant, but that is very, very bespoke to, you know, your restaurant, to your family, right? And that exactly shows, okay, this is what we need, and this is how, you know, these services are going to be provided, and by whom, be it outsourced or being done internally. And I think that could be the right outcome of a strategy, you know, strategy definition or strategy refreshing exercise. And based on that, at least, you know, we know where we're going, and we can build, you know, the details, build the whole framework around it.
Taking your simile of menu, a lot of people think that a single family office must be a 3-star Michelin restaurant. And as we demonstrated in a previous session, it can actually take multiple form and also cater to multiple assets under management, multiple budget, depending on how it works. It can be morphed to suit any family's needs, depending on budget. And I love your point here. It's not only for billionaires, it can be for affluent plus borderline high net worth. You can already start to have a SFO-like organization, right?
Absolutely, absolutely, Jan. That's another myth that, you know, I wanted to break. Yes, a full service, you know, family office that has a strong, you know, management team, and that does pretty much everything, you know, by itself. Yeah, you need to have a very significant threshold, you know, definitely over $100 million of, you know, liquid assets under management to afford that, because costs are so high. But a leaner structure, right, which with maybe less services being provided, or with more services being outsourced, you can honestly afford it with much less than that. And if you think, well, still, you know, that's too much for me, again, as we said last time, don't forget the multifamily
Yep.
office. Some of them are very bad, but some of them are excellent and really have the best interest of the family, you know, in mind and at heart, and honestly are providing a level of service that is not similar but comparable to what you can get from a single family office. The downside, of course, is that, you know, it's not entirely under your control, and, you know, your data is commingled to a certain extent. Technology, you know, can still keep it somehow separated.
Yes.
But still, your data, your information is commingled with the one of others, as you were doing, you know, when you were simply contracting directly with a bank, for instance.
And case in point, just this week, we have been engaged to start a process with one family, and we know that they are going to have a first cash event, which is this, and another one that will be probably 4 times that. Guess what? The first one is about $20 million, and there they have already devised some of their strategy. So their long haul strategy is set now. It will just be implemented in phases. And as you mentioned, phase 1 is consolidation of the assets, which for now are not house kept at all. And it's actually allocation of outsource mandate, because for now they cannot afford something different. They cannot insource, and they have weighted pros and cons, and they are perfectly fine with this model until the time they reach that level where they can do a little bit more in-house, a little bit more, and have a little bit more control, because at that time they'll be completely out of their historical business. So very good point here in terms of how SFO can progress and evolve. And that's your next point, is once you set it up, it's actually the beginning of the journey, right? You need to maintain it. You need to ensure that at all stage you keep on developing and nurturing this tool that is the SFO.
Absolutely. I mean, look, in line with what you were saying, some FOs actually takes time to develop. They're being built in phases. They start, you know, as an embedded family office, as we say, you know, so within the business, gradually, you know, growing, and then, you know, being taken out of the business, and then, you know, to be at some point legally incorporated, and maybe to, you know, to receive transfer of people from the business, or new hires, you know, as the family, you know, wealth cycle, you know, continues and grows. But there is also, simply, the realization that indeed you create an FO, you've done everything right, it has a strategy, it has, menu of service, policies and procedure, you've invested a lot of time and money to hire, the right people. Well, then, guess what? It's like really, again, like a business. If you want to be, well, you need to define first if you want to be involved in that business operationally or not. If you don't want to be involved operationally, you need to make sure that you have the right people to do it for you,
Yes.
on your behalf. And at the same time that, these people are going to report to you on a periodical basis. So you can, see what's going on and, be reassured at the end of the day that everything is in good hands. So there's a periodical review, and I think no wealth owner can escape that, even a soft one, even if they, have delegated every responsibility to competent people. But there's also, the fact that, the world is changing all the time. And of course, the same is true for regulations, taxation, and laws and economic conditions as well. So something that we haven't mentioned that much, and which is very much part of the strategy, for instance, is the strategic asset allocation,
Yes.
right? That bankers or financial consultant generally creates for FOs, right? Which is holistic. Well, guess what? It has to be reviewed on a periodical basis and adjusted, if necessary. Well, it's the same with, the way the business, or the way the business of the family office, the way the family office operates, it needs to be reviewed and amended on a periodical basis to make sure it still basically meet the requirements of the family, because not only, the external world, let's say, or external parameters change, also internal parameters, so the internal parameters of a family, they also change. Yeah. And so you need to take, all of that into consideration, as I said, and, set what we generally call with our clients stress tests, right? So you're going to stress test the family office and all the components of the family office on a periodical basis, for instance, once a year. And, you're going to issue either an internal report, or you're going to hire a consultant to do it and issue an external report, with a list of, risk that will be highlighted, that will be identified. And then you can think, oh, okay, I didn't know about that. Well, I knew about that. And then, create some sort of step plan to address those risks, to mitigate those risks in the future. So definitely the creation of the family office is not the end, but rather the beginning.
And last myth we need to break, and we have tried to break it for the past 2 weeks. A lot of people think of SFO as a holding automatically. It isn't, right?
It doesn't have to be.
Yeah.
Right. And for certain, sometimes confidentiality or, tax reason, an FO as a holding might be good, right? But if you do not have, that's how I would put it. If you do not have a requirement to, be tax driven, regulatory driven, for the FO to own the assets, I would always say the FO is not the best tool to own the assets. You have much better tools, available. And, one that is part, of this series, or that's the theme actually of this series of podcasts, is of course the foundation, right? But you have trust that, can be combined with private trust companies. Of course, in certain cases, it might be life insurance or PPLI. Yep. So there are many different, wrappers that you can use. But again, if there is no tax or regulatory reason to place the asset, or confidentiality reason to place the assets on the FO, I'd rather see the FO as an asset, as an investment manager, or as an investment advisor, or as some sort of consultant, right? As a consulting boutique that provides services to its client, being the family members or legal entities belonging to them, such as trust foundations or any other legal entities. And that's, I think, very, very important, because there's a lot of misconceptions in the market about that, right? As much as you want your FO to be the best FO, right, you also want to have your wealth ownership structure to be the best wealth ownership structure, according to your, to your objectives and your requirements. And again, an FO, being by nature a company, will not meet the requirements of all families, particularly when it comes to succession planning and asset protection.
So thanks a lot for saying that from your way, because we are very busy now trying to reach out to all regional SFOs and just educate them, because a lot of people have this misconception and it's extremely difficult to change opinions. But hey, one client at a time, as they say. So we saw the 5 do's, the 5 don'ts. Of course, there is more, but we try to be very selective in giving this short menu, the lunch menu of sort. If you want the entire menu, then you contact Ismael, and he will, and his excellent team will walk you through whatever you want to achieve. Next week, we will be talking governance. And how non-executive directors can add value to single family office and family holding structures in general, something not every family is keen on doing at inception, but a lot of families find value in doing. And we will explain why with Christian Knie. Ismael, thank you very much for your input, and I wish you a good day ahead. Goodbye.
Have a great day. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.